The fluorescent lights of the Highway 9 diner flickered when 7-year-old Amara Carter noticed a faded tattoo on a stranger's forearm and said something that made 5 former Navy SEALs freeze and shock. My dad had that exact tattoo, same place. But that particular marking wasn't something you could get at any shop. It identified members of a covert unit, and officially, one of those members, Lieutenant Isaiah Carter, had been declared killed in action 7 years ago. His body never recovered yet now. His daughter stood before them asking innocent questions that could unravel a military conspiracy built on corruption and betrayal. And as Nia Carter rushed to pull Amara away, panic flashing across her normally calm face, the carefully buried truth about a man who sacrificed everything was about to surface in ways none of them could have predicted. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The fluorescent lights above the Highway 9 diner flickered in their usual rhythm, casting uneven shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Nia Carter moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her ponytail swinging as she balanced 3 plates along her left arm and carried a coffee pot in her right hand. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, the kind of smell that clung to your clothes long after your shift ended. "Refill?" Nia asked the trucker in booth 7, her smile warm but tired. He nodded without looking up from his phone, and she poured carefully, avoiding. It was nearly 8 in the evening, and her feet ached in the white sneakers she'd worn for 3 years now. The sole on the left one was separating slightly, but new shoes would have to wait until next month. "Mama, I finished my homework." The small voice came from the corner booth, where 7-year-old Amara sat, surrounded by textbooks and colored pencils. Her school backpack took up half the vinyl seat, decorated with patches Nia had sewn on to cover the tears. "Good job, baby. Let me see it when I'm done with this section." Amara nodded seriously, her cornrows neat from the hour Nia had spent braiding them that morning before school. The girl had her mother's dark eyes, but a thoughtfulness that seemed older than 7. She rarely complained about spending afternoons at the diner, doing homework in the booth while Nia worked. She understood, in the way children understand things they've never been told directly, that money was tight and options were limited. The dinner rush had slowed to a trickle. 3 regulars sat at the counter, and an elderly couple occupied booth 4. Nia glanced at the clock. Another hour and a half, then the bus ride home, then maybe 30 minutes with Amara before bedtime. This was their routine, lived 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when overtime was available. Their apartment was small, a 1-bedroom in a building where the elevator worked half the time and the neighbors kept to themselves. But Nia had made it warm. There were curtains she'd sewn herself, plants on the windowsill that Amara watered every Sunday, and photographs on the wall showing the 2 of them at the park, at Amara's school concerts, at the library during summer reading programs. What the photographs didn't show was a father. What they didn't include was any explanation for his absence. Amara had asked, of course. She was too smart not to notice what other families had that they didn't. "Where's my daddy?" "He was very brave," Nia would say, her voice careful. "He had to go away before you were born." "Will he come back?" "I don't know, sweetheart." The conversations never went further than that. Nia kept the truth locked away, just like she kept the small metal box hidden in the back of her closet, behind the winter coats and broken vacuum cleaner. She never opened it. Opening it meant remembering, and remembering hurt worse than the ache in her feet or the tightness in her budget. The bell above the diner door chimed, pulling Nia from her thoughts. 5 men walked in, and the energy in the room shifted slightly. They weren't loud or aggressive, but they carried themselves differently than the usual crowd. They were older, probably in their 40s, with the kind of weathered faces that came from years spent outdoors. Their clothes were casual, jeans and flannel shirts, but something about the way they moved suggested discipline. "Sit anywhere you like," Nia called out, grabbing menus from the hostess stand. They chose the large booth near the window, the one that could fit 6 people if they squeezed. As Nia approached with water glasses, she noticed details. One had a scar running along his jawline. Another walked with a slight limp. The man at the end of the booth had close-cropped gray hair and the kind of steady gaze that made you feel like he was assessing everything without being obvious about it. "Evening, gentlemen." Can I start you off with some coffee? Please, the gray-haired man said. His voice was deep, polite. We've been driving since this morning. As Nia poured, she caught fragments of their conversation. Something about Colorado, a mention of Fort Bragg. One of them laughed and said something about the good old days, and another responded that his knees disagreed about how good those days were. Military, Nia thought. Retired or former, by the sound of it. She took their orders without really listening to her own voice, her mind already moving to the next task. Table 3 needed their check. The coffee pot needed refilling. Amara would want dinner soon. Probably just pancakes and eggs from the kitchen, the meal that Marco the cook always made without charging her. Mama, can I help wipe tables? Amara appeared at her elbow, holding a damp cloth. Sure, baby. Start with booth 2, okay. Amara moved away with her cloth, serious about her task. She liked helping, liked feeling useful. Nia watched her for a moment, feeling the familiar mixture of love and guilt. Amara deserved more than afternoons in a diner, more than a mother who came home exhausted every night, more than the careful budgeting that meant birthday presents came from thrift stores. She deserved a father. Nia pushed the thought away and returned to the kitchen, calling out orders to Marco, checking on the elderly couple, refilling coffee cups at the counter. The rhythm of work was comforting. It kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. When she came back out, Amara was near the booth with the 5 men, wiping down the empty table next to theirs. The girl worked carefully, making sure she got the corners where crumbs accumulated. One of the men was leaning back, his arm stretched along the back of the booth, and Nia saw his forearm clearly for the first time. There was a tattoo there, faded but distinct. Dark ink formed a pattern that looked almost like a compass rose, but with additional symbols woven into it. Military insignia, probably. Nia had seen enough veterans come through the diner to recognize the style. She was turning away when Amara spoke, her young voice clear in the relative quiet of the evening diner. My dad had that exact tattoo. Same place on his arm. Everything stopped. The conversation at the booth cut off mid-sentence. The man with the tattoo froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. The gray-haired man turned slowly to look at Amara, his expression shifting from casual to intense in a heartbeat. Nia felt her chest tighten. She moved toward them, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. Amara, honey, come help me in the back. But the gray-haired man was already leaning forward, his voice gentle. What's your name, sweetheart? Amara Carter. Nia saw the recognition flash across his face, saw the way his jaw tightened and his shoulders went rigid. The other men at the table had gone completely still, their attention locked on the small girl with the cleaning cloth. Amara. The name came out quiet, almost reverent. Who was your father? I don't know. Mama says he went away before I was born. Amara spoke matter-of-factly, without sadness. This was simply her reality. But she has a picture, and he has that tattoo. I remember because it looked like a star. The coffee cup hit the table with a soft thud. Another man, the one with the scar on his jaw, leaned forward and stared at the tattooed man's forearm, as if seeing it for the first time. Chief, he said, his voice low and urgent. I know. The gray-haired man, apparently called Chief, didn't take his eyes off Amara. Nia reached her daughter and put both hands on her shoulders, pulling her back gently. Excuse us, gentlemen. Amara, I need your help with something right now. Her voice came out sharper than she intended, edged with something that might have been fear or might have been anger. The men at the table were staring at her now, their expressions a mixture of shock and confusion, and something else she couldn't identify. Ma'am, the chief said, standing up slowly. I don't mean to intrude, but could I ask you a question? I'm very busy. Nia's hands tightened on Amara's shoulders. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Lots of military men have tattoos. Not like this one. The chief's voice was firm, but not unkind. This tattoo was specific to a particular unit, a very small group. Nia felt the floor shift beneath her. She'd known, somewhere deep down, that this moment might come someday, that the past she'd tried to bury might resurface. But she'd convinced herself over 7 years that it was safe to stop looking over her shoulder. I really need to get back to work. She turned, guiding Amara toward the kitchen, but she could feel 5 sets of eyes on her back. Behind her, she heard the urgent whisper of voices, low and intense. Did he have a kid? I never heard anything about. Check the dates. When did? This doesn't make sense. If he had a daughter, why wouldn't? Nia pushed through the kitchen door, her breathing uneven. Marco looked up from the grill, his weathered face creasing with concern. You okay, Nia? Fine. Just need a minute. She guided Amara to the small break room. Nothing more than a closet with a folding chair and a shelf for employee belongings. Once the door was closed, she knelt down to her daughter's eye level. Baby, I need you to not talk about your father to strangers, okay? Amara's face crinkled with confusion. Why? I just said he had the same tattoo. I thought maybe they knew him. The innocence in those words cut deep. Nia closed her eyes briefly, gathering herself. I know, sweetheart, but it's private family business. You understand? I guess. Amara didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Did I do something wrong? No, baby. No, we didn't do anything wrong. Nia pulled her daughter into a hug, breathing in the smell of her cocoa butter lotion and school chalk. You never do anything wrong. But even as she said it, Nia's mind was racing. That tattoo. She hadn't seen it in years, but she remembered it perfectly. Isaiah had explained it once, late at night when they'd been lying together in the small apartment near the naval base. It's not just decoration, he'd said, tracing the lines with his finger. It means something. Identifies us. Identifies you as what? People who go places we're not supposed to talk about. People who do things that don't make it into official reports. She'd asked what that meant, but he just kissed her forehead and said some things were better left unknown. 3 weeks later, he was gone. No body, no funeral, just a formal visit from 2 officers who spoke in careful, scripted sentences about classified operations and regrettable losses and the grateful nation. They'd handed her a folded flag and a form letter signed by someone whose name she didn't recognize. And then, 6 months after that, she discovered she was pregnant. Nia released Amara and stood up, her knees protesting. Stay here for a few minutes, okay? I need to finish up my tables. When she returned to the main floor, the booth by the window was empty. The men had left cash on the table, more than enough to cover their meal and a generous tip. But they hadn't left. Through the window, she could see them standing by a large black pickup truck in the parking lot, talking in a tight circle. The chief looked up and made eye contact with her through the glass. He raised one hand, not quite a wave, more of an acknowledgement. Then he pulled out his phone and appeared to take a photo of the diner's exterior. Nia's stomach dropped. She grabbed the cash from the table with shaking hands and moved to the next booth, going through the motions of work while her mind spun. They'd recognized something. The tattoo, yes, but also the name. Amara Carter. They'd reacted to both pieces together, and that reaction had been visceral, which meant they'd known Isaiah, which meant they might have questions she couldn't answer, which meant the careful, quiet life she'd built might be about to collapse. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She smiled at customers and poured coffee and cleared plates, all while her thoughts circled obsessively. When closing time finally came, she collected Amara and their belongings and stepped out into the cool night air. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, illuminated by a single streetlight. As they walked, Nia kept glancing over her shoulder, checking the shadows between buildings, studying the few cars parked along the street. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. On the bus, Amara leaned against her shoulder, drowsy from the long day. Nia stroked her daughter's hair absently, staring out the window at the passing streets. Mama. Amara's voice was sleepy. Why did those men look so surprised? I don't know, baby. Do you think they really knew Daddy? Nia's throat tightened. Maybe. I don't know. If they did, would they tell us about him? That was the question, wasn't it? What would they tell? What did they know? And more importantly, what did their knowledge mean for her and Amara? We'll see, Nia said softly. Try to sleep a little. But sleep wouldn't come for her that night. After they got home, after she'd tucked Amara into bed and changed into worn pajamas, Nia found herself standing in front of her closet. Her hand hovered over the winter coats, over the place where the metal box was hidden. She hadn't opened it in years, hadn't allowed herself to. But now her fingers moved of their own accord, pushing aside coats, reaching into the back corner, finding the cool metal surface. The box was small, about the size of a shoebox, with a simple combination lock. Her hands remembered the numbers without conscious thought. 3 turns right, 2 left, 1 right again. The lock clicked open. Inside were the remnants of a relationship that had lasted only months but had changed her entire life. A few photographs, slightly faded. Isaiah, in civilian clothes, smiling at the camera with an expression that was both confident and gentle. Isaiah, in uniform, though she wasn't supposed to have that photo. A handful of letters he'd written, his handwriting neat and precise. A hospital bracelet from when Amara was born, with baby girl Carter printed in blue ink. And, at the bottom, wrapped in a piece of cloth, a small flash drive. Nia picked it up carefully. Isaiah had given it to her 2 days before he left for the mission he never returned from. His face had been serious, his voice low. "If anything happens to me, I need you to keep this safe. Nothing's going to happen to you." Nia. He'd cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "Promise me. Keep it safe. Don't look at what's on it. Don't show it to anyone. But don't lose it. If I come back, I'll explain everything. If I don't..." He hadn't finished the sentence. He'd just kissed her, long and deep, and then he was gone. She'd never plugged the drive into a computer, never tried to see what files it contained. She'd simply kept it, as promised, hidden away with everything else from that brief, intense period of her life. Now, she held it up to the dim light from the hallway, turning it over in her fingers. It was just a standard USB drive, black plastic, no markings. But Isaiah had thought it was important enough to entrust to her in his final days. Nia wrapped it back in the cloth and placed it in the box. She closed the lid and reset the lock, then pushed the box back into its hiding place. But she didn't move away from the closet. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, and allowed the memories to wash over her. Isaiah's laugh, the way he'd listen when she talked, really listened, his full attention on her, as if nothing else in the world mattered. The night he'd told her he loved her, his voice shaking slightly because he wasn't used to being vulnerable. The morning she'd woken up and known, with absolute certainty, that she was carrying his child. The months of waiting for news. The slow, dawning realization that he wasn't coming back. The grief that had nearly swallowed her whole, made worse by the fact that she couldn't properly mourn because officially Isaiah Carter's death was classified information. She couldn't even get a straight answer about how he died or where. And then Amara was born, and grief had transformed into fierce protective love. She had a daughter to raise, a child who would need strength and stability. There was no time for falling apart. There was only the daily work of survival, of creating a life for her baby girl. 7 years she'd done this alone. 7 years of careful obscurity. And now 5 men with recognition in their eyes had walked into her diner. Morning came with pale sunlight and the sound of traffic from the street below. Nia woke from restless sleep, her mind immediately returning to the previous night. She got Amara ready for school with automatic efficiency, braiding her hair and packing her lunch and making sure her homework was in her backpack. "Mama, are you okay?" Amara asked as they waited for the school bus. "You seem sad." Nia managed a smile. "Just tired, baby. I'm Fina." But she wasn't fine. All day at the diner, she jumped at the bell above the door, her eyes scanning each new arrival. She half expected the 5 men to return, to demand answers to questions she didn't want to face. The lunch shift was busy enough to distract her. The usual mix of construction workers and retirees, and people who worked from laptops in the corner booths. Marco whistled while he cooked, and Rita, the other waitress, complained about her teenage son's latest report card. Normal. Everything was normal. Until 2 in the afternoon, when the bell chimed and Nia looked up to see the chief from the night before walking in alone. He was dressed in jeans and a simple blue button-down, and he moved with the same measured confidence. His eyes found her immediately, and he nodded once before taking a seat at the counter. Nia's first instinct was to retreat to the kitchen and let Rita handle him. but she forced herself to walk over, coffee pot in hand, professional smile in place. Coffee, please. He waited until she'd poured before speaking again. I apologize if we startled you and your daughter last night. That wasn't our intention. It's fine. Nia kept her voice neutral. Menu's on the board behind me. I'm not really here for the food, though your pie was excellent last night. He folded his hands on the counter. My name is Mason Hale. I served with a man named Isaiah Carter about 8 years ago. There it was. The name spoken aloud, in this diner, in the middle of a Thursday afternoon. Nia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. I don't know anyone by that name. Your daughter's name is Amara Carter. Mason's voice was gentle but persistent. And last night she told us her father had a tattoo identical to one worn by members of a very specific SEAL unit. A unit that Isaiah Carter belonged to. Nia set the coffee pot down carefully. Lots of men have military tattoos. Not this one. This tattoo wasn't something you could just get at any shop. It was designed by our unit. Only 12 men ever had it. Mason paused. Isaiah was one of them. Around them, the diner continued its normal rhythm. Someone laughed at a nearby table. The register chimed. But Nia felt like she was standing in a bubble of silence, separate from everything else. Why are you here? She asked quietly. Because Isaiah Carter was listed as killed in action 7 years ago during a classified operation. Because his body was never recovered. And because last night, we discovered he may have had a daughter we knew nothing about. Mason's gray eyes were steady. I need to know if Amara is his child. And if she is, then there are questions that need answering. He leaned forward slightly. Isaiah was one of the best men I ever served with. Honorable, loyal, the kind of soldier who'd put himself between civilians and danger without hesitation. If he had a daughter, he would have wanted his team to know. He would have wanted to make sure she was taken care of. Nia's throat felt tight. Maybe he didn't have time to tell anyone. The mission he died on, he knew about it 3 weeks in advance. He had time. Mason's expression softened. Unless there was a reason he kept it quiet. Nia looked away, staring at the coffee pot's reflection in the metal napkin holder. She kept this secret for 7 years, guarding it fiercely. But maybe secrets were like water, always finding ways to seep through the cracks. He didn't die on that mission, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. At least, not when they said he did. Mason went very still. What do you mean? Nia glanced around, confirming no one was close enough to overhear. 2 days before he left, Isaiah came to my apartment. He was different, agitated. He kept checking his phone, looking out the window. She swallowed hard. He told me something was wrong with the mission, that the briefing didn't match what his intelligence contacts were saying. He was worried. Did he say what specifically was wrong? No, just that something fell off. He said if anything happened to him, I needed to protect our child. Nia met Mason's eyes. I didn't even know I was pregnant yet. But he knew. Somehow he knew. Mason was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Did he leave anything with you? Any documentation or files? Nia hesitated. The flash drive felt like it was burning a hole through the walls of her apartment, through the metal box, through all the layers she'd wrapped around it. Why would he have left documentation? Because Isaiah was smart. If he suspected something was wrong, he would have created insurance. Mason's voice dropped lower. The official report said he was killed during a firefight with insurgents. Clean, simple, tragic. But 3 months after that mission, 2 other members of our unit started asking questions. They noticed inconsistencies in the after-action reports. They were told to drop it. When they didn't, they were transferred to different assignments, split up. You think someone wanted him dead? I think someone didn't want questions asked. Mason ran a hand through his gray hair. And I think your daughter just brought those questions back into the light. A customer called for a refill, breaking the moment. Nia automatically reached for the coffee pot, her hands moving through practiced motions while her mind reeled. When she returned to Mason, he'd pulled out a business card. This has my cell number. If you remember anything else, or if you need help with anything, call me. Nia took the card without looking at it. What happens now? Now I talk to my team. We look into things we should have looked into years ago. He stood, leaving a $20 bill on the counter. And Nia, if I'm right about this, You and Amara might need protection. People who hide things don't like it when those things resurface. He left without ordering food, and Nia stood behind the counter with the business card in her hand, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. That evening, after her shift ended and she'd collected Amara from the neighbor who watched her in the afternoons, Nia found herself looking at every parked car on their street, every person standing near their building. The paranoia a Mason had planted was growing roots. Their apartment felt too small, too exposed. Windows that had always seemed normal now looked like vulnerabilities. Nia triple-checked the locks and drew all the curtains before letting Amara settle in with her homework. "Mama, you're acting weird," Amara observed from the kitchen table. "Just tired, baby." But Amara wasn't fooled. She had her father's perceptiveness, though she'd never known it. "Is it because of those men from the diner?" Nia sat down across from her daughter, trying to find words that would be honest without being frightening. "Remember how I told you your father was brave?" Amara nodded, setting down her pencil. "He did work that was important. Work that helped people. And sometimes when people do important work, it can be complicated." Nia reached across the table and took her daughter's small hand. "Those men knew your father. They worked with him, and they want to help us understand what happened to him. So maybe we'll learn more about Daddy." The hope in Amara's voice made Nia's chest ache. "Maybe. I don't know yet. I hope so," Amara said quietly. "Sometimes I draw pictures of what I think he looks like, but it would be nice to know for real." After Amara was in bed, Nia sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of tea and Mason's business card. She'd Googled him on her phone, finding very little. A few mentions in military news articles from years ago, always in passing. One photograph of him receiving some kind of commendation, his face younger, but still serious. She thought about the flash drive hidden in her closet, about Isaiah's warning, about the weight of secrets she'd carried alone. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept. "Nia Carter?" The voice was unfamiliar. Male, professional. "Yes. This is Lieutenant Commander Phillips from Naval Personnel Command. I'm calling regarding Isaiah Carter. I understand someone has been making inquiries on your behalf." Nia's grip tightened on the phone. "I didn't ask anyone to make inquiries. Nevertheless, inquiries have been made. I want to assure you that Isaiah Carter's service record and circumstances of death are a matter of official record. While I understand this may be difficult, we ask that you refrain from pursuing unofficial investigations that could compromise classified operations." The words were polite, but the message was clear. Back off. "I'm not pursuing anything." "I'm glad to hear that. For your peace of mind, I can confirm that Isaiah Carter died honorably in service to his country. His sacrifice is appreciated." A pause. "I trust this matter is now closed." The line went dead before Nia could respond. She sat in the dark kitchen, staring at her phone, her heart hammering. That phone call was a warning. A subtle one, wrapped in official language, but a warning nonetheless. Someone was watching. Someone knew that Mason Hale had talked to her, and someone wanted to make sure this went no further. Nia's hand shook as she set the phone down. She thought about Amara sleeping in the next room, innocent and safe. She thought about the flash drive in the closet. She thought about Isaiah's final words, "Protect our child." Maybe the best protection was silence. Maybe the smart thing was to tell Mason Hale to stop asking questions, to let the past stay buried. But she also thought about Amara's hopeful face when she talked about learning more about her father, about the injustice of a man dying and his daughter never knowing the truth, about the way Isaiah had looked at her when he'd asked her to keep the flash drive safe. "If anything happens, I need you to keep this safe." He'd trusted her with something important. He believed in her strength. The next day, Nia called the number on Mason Hale's card. "I need to talk to you," she said when he answered. "Somewhere private. And I need you to tell me the truth about what you're planning to do." "There's a park 3 blocks from your building," Mason said immediately. "Can you meet me there tomorrow afternoon? I work until 3. I'll be there at 3:30. Nia hung up and stared at her reflection in the darkened phone screen. She was crossing a line, and she knew it. But maybe some lines needed to be crossed. Maybe some truths needed to be told, even when they were dangerous. For Tamara. For Isaiah. For herself. The decision was made. The park was mostly empty when Nia arrived at 3:30. Just a few joggers on the path and an elderly man feeding pigeons near the fountain. She spotted Mason Hale sitting on a bench under a large oak tree, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket. He stood when he saw her approaching. "Thank you for coming," he said. Nia sat down on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance. "I got a phone call last night from someone claiming to be from Naval Personnel Command." Mason's expression darkened. "What did they say?" "That I should stop pursuing unofficial investigations. That Isaiah's death is a matter of official record." She watched his reaction carefully. "How do they know you talked to me?" "They're watching. Either me or you, probably both." Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That phone call confirms what I suspected. There's something about Isaiah's death they don't want examined. Maybe there's nothing to find. Maybe he just died the way they said he did. Then why warn you off?" Mason turned to look at her. If it was straightforward, they'd ignore us. The fact that they're paying attention means we're onto something. Nia pulled her jacket tighter against the autumn breeze. "I have a daughter to protect. Getting involved in some military conspiracy isn't exactly safe parenting." "I understand that. But don't you want to know what really happened to Isaiah? Don't you think Amara deserves to know the truth about her father?" The words hit harder than Nia wanted to admit. She'd spent 7 years telling herself that ignorance was protection, that not knowing kept them safe. But maybe safety built on lies was just another kind of prison. "Isaiah gave me something," she said quietly. "Before his last mission, a flash drive. He told me to keep it safe, not to look at what was on it, and not to show anyone." Mason sat up straighter. "Do you still have it?" "Yes, but I've never opened it. I don't even know if it still works after all these years. That drive could have the answers we need." Mason's voice was urgent but controlled. Whatever Isaiah discovered, whatever made him suspicious about that mission, he might have documented it. Or it could be personal files, photos, letters. Nia shook her head. "I don't know if I'm ready to break a promise I made to him." "He told you to keep it safe. He didn't say never to use it." Mason paused, choosing his words carefully. "Nia, I served with Isaiah for 3 years. I saw him in situations that would break most men. He never wavered, never compromised his principles. If he went to the trouble of leaving you that drive, it's because he knew someday it might matter." Nia stared at the fountain, watching water arc and fall in endless repetition. "If I give this to you, what happens next?" "My team and I will try to decrypt whatever's on it. Depending on what we find, we'll decide how to proceed. We're not looking to make this public unnecessarily. We just want the truth. And if the truth is dangerous, then we handle it carefully, but we don't hide from it." Mason's gray eyes were steady. "I made a promise to every man in my unit that I'd have their backs, even after we left service. Isaiah was one of those men. I failed him once by not questioning his death harder. I won't fail him again." The sincerity in his voice made Nia's decision easier. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was the flash drive, exactly as Isaiah had wrapped it 7 years ago. "I need you to promise me something," she said, holding it but not yet handing it over. "Whatever you find, whatever this leads to, you keep my daughter out of it. She doesn't get dragged into press conferences or investigations or whatever else happens. She gets to stay a normal kid. You have my word." Nia placed the drive in his hand. The physical act of letting go felt monumental, like she was releasing years of held breath. "What do I tell Amara? She's been asking about those men from the diner, about her father. Tell her the truth, as much as you can, that we're trying to learn more about what happened to Isaiah. That it might take time." Mason pocketed the drive carefully. "And Nia, be careful. Watch for anyone following you, any cars that seem to show up too often. If anything feels wrong, call me immediately." After Mason left, Nia sat alone on the bench for another 20 minutes, processing what she'd done. The flash drive was gone, out of her control now, and with it went the last physical piece of Isaiah she'd been holding on to. But maybe that was necessary. Maybe holding on too tightly was just another form of running away. Her phone buzzed with a text from the neighbor who watched Amara after school. "Running late, sorry. Amara's fine, watching cartoons." Nia texted back that it was okay, and allowed herself a few more minutes of quiet. The park was peaceful, the kind of ordinary afternoon that felt precious now that she knew someone might be watching. When she finally headed home, she took a deliberately indirect route, checking reflections in store windows, noting the cars parked along each block. She felt slightly ridiculous, like she was play-acting at being a spy. But Mason's warning had been serious, and that phone call last night had been real. At home, Amara greeted her with a drawing she'd made at school. "It's our family," she explained, showing a picture with two stick figures, one tall and one small. "But I left space for Daddy, in case we find out more about him." The empty space on the paper made Nia's throat tight. "It's beautiful, baby. Let's put it on the fridge." Over the next 3 days, life continued with surface normalcy. Nia worked her shifts at the diner. Amara went to school. They rode the bus and ate simple dinners and watched shows together before bedtime. But underneath, Nia felt the constant hum of anxiety. She noticed a black SUV parked across from their building 2 nights in a row. She recognized a man in a suit who seemed to be at the diner during lunch for 3 consecutive days, always sitting alone, always watching. Her phone didn't ring again with official warnings, but the silence felt loaded, like the pause before thunder. On the 4th day, Mason called. "Can you meet me? Same place, 6 o'clock. Is everything okay? We need to talk. Bring Amara if you need to." The careful neutrality in his voice made Nia's stomach clench, but she agreed. After her shift, she picked up Amara and they walked to the park together. This time, Mason wasn't alone. 2 other men from the original group stood with him, the one with the scar and a broader man with dark skin and kind eyes. "Nia, this is Jake Morrison and Derek Williams." They were also part of Isaiah's unit. Mason gestured to the bench. "Please sit." Amara stayed close to Nia's side, suddenly shy around the 3 large men. Derek knelt down to her, eye level, and smiled. "You must be Amara. Your dad used to carry a picture of your mom in his vest pocket. Drove us crazy because he wouldn't shut up about how amazing she was." Amara's eyes widened. Really? He was crazy about her. Derek's smile was genuine, and Nia felt something loosen in her chest. These men had known Isaiah. They carried memories she didn't have access to. Mason waited until Derek stood back up before speaking. "We were able to access the flash drive. It took some work, but we got through the encryption." And Nia's hands gripped Amara's shoulders. "It's documentation. Emails, photos, financial records, communication logs." Mason's expression was grim. Isaiah was investigating unauthorized weapons deals. Someone in the command structure was facilitating sales to private contractors who were then reselling to groups our government officially opposed. Isaiah stumbled onto it during a previous mission and started collecting evidence. Jake stepped forward, his scarred face serious. The mission he died on wasn't what it appeared to be. According to his notes, he'd been ordered to a location that didn't match the intelligence briefing. He suspected it was a setup to kill him. Nia's voice came out strained. To silence him. To make sure the investigation died with him. Mason pulled out his phone and showed her a scanned document. "This is an email Isaiah sent to a military oversight contact 3 days before the mission. He outlined his concerns and asked for a formal investigation. That email was never logged in official records." Nia stared at the screen, seeing Isaiah's words, his careful documentation, his attempt to do things the right way. "So they killed him for being honest. We don't know for certain he's dead," Derek said quietly. "His body was never recovered. The official report says he was killed in an explosion, but there's no DNA confirmation, no remains." The world seemed to tilt. Nia sat down heavily on the bench, pulling Amara with her. "What are you saying?" "We're saying there are inconsistencies. Big ones." Mason sat beside her. "There's mission footage that shows activity after Isaiah's supposed death. Timestamps that don't line up. And in the files on that drive, there's a note dated 2 days after he was declared killed in action. That's impossible. Unless he survived and someone wanted everyone to think he didn't." Jake crossed his arms. "We've seen it before, in different contexts. An operative becomes inconvenient, so they're disappeared. New identity, new location, kept isolated." Amara tugged on Nia's sleeve. Mama, does this mean Daddy might be alive? The hope in her daughter's voice was almost too much to bear. Nia looked at Mason, desperate for something concrete. You can't tell her this unless you're sure. You can't give her hope and then take it away. We're not sure, Mason admitted, but we're going to find out. We're meeting with a contact who has access to classified personnel movements. If Isaiah was relocated under protective custody or any kind of witness protection scenario, there will be traces. And if he wasn't, if he really did die, then at least we'll know the truth. And we can make sure the people responsible for his death face consequences. Nia pulled Amara close, her mind spinning with possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider. For 7 years, she'd mourned Isaiah as dead, built her life around his absence. The idea that he might be alive somewhere, kept away from her and their daughter by bureaucratic cruelty or corruption, ignited a fury she hadn't known she was capable of. What do you need from me? She asked. Right now, just be careful. We're going to push harder on this, which means whoever's been watching you will probably escalate their pressure. Mason's voice was firm. If anyone approaches you, if anyone threatens you or Amara, you call me immediately, day or night. Derek knelt again in front of Amara. Your dad was one of the bravest men I ever knew. And if there's any chance he's still out there, we're going to find him. That's a promise. Walking home, Amara was unusually quiet. When they reached their building, she finally spoke. Do you think Daddy's really alive? Nia stopped on the steps, choosing her words carefully. I don't know, sweetheart, but those men are going to try to find out. And whatever the truth is, we'll face it together, okay? Okay. Amara squeezed her hand. I'm glad those men knew Daddy. It makes him feel more real. That night, after Amara was asleep, Nia stood at their apartment window, looking out at the street below. The black SUV was there again, parked under a broken streetlight. She stared at it for a long time, her fears slowly transforming into something harder, more resolute. If Isaiah had sacrificed everything to expose corruption, the least she could do was refuse to be intimidated into silence. If he'd trusted her with that flash drive, trusted her to protect their daughter, then she owed him the courage to see this through. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number again. She answered, ready for another official warning. Ms. Carter, this is Clara Jennings. I'm an investigative journalist specializing in military accountability cases. The voice was female, professional but warm. I understand you've been asking questions about Isaiah Carter. How did you get this number? I have sources within the veteran community. I've been following stories of service members who died under suspicious circumstances. Clara paused. I'd like to talk to you about Isaiah. Off the record, if you prefer. I think I can help. Nia's grip tightened on the phone. Help how? By making sure his story doesn't get buried again. By giving you leverage against people who prefer operating in darkness. Another pause. I know you have a daughter. I know you're scared. But sometimes the safest thing is to make sure the truth is too public to suppress. I need to think about it. Of course. I'll text you my contact information. If you decide you want to talk, I'm ready to listen. Clara's voice softened. For what it's worth, I've read classified briefs about Isaiah Carter. He was trying to do the right thing. He deserves better than an unmarked grave and a file full of lies. The call ended, and Nia stood in the dark apartment, feeling the weight of decisions pressing down on her. Mason and his team represented one path, working quietly within military channels. Clara Jennings represented another, the power of public exposure. Both carried risks. Both required trust. She thought about Isaiah's face in the photographs hidden in her closet. Thought about the life they might have had if he'd come home. Thought about Amara growing up with a father who'd been stolen from her by corruption and cowardice. The rage that had been building for days crystallized into determination. Mason called 2 days later with an update. We found something. Can you come to my hotel? It's safer than meeting in public. Nia arranged for Amara to stay with a neighbor and took 2 buses to reach the downtown hotel Mason had named. He'd given her a room number, and when she knocked, 3 men answered. Mason, Derek, and a 4th man she hadn't met before. This is Carlos Reyes, our tech specialist. He's been analyzing the metadata on Isaiah's files. Mason gestured to a laptop set up on the hotel desk, surrounded by papers and coffee cups. Carlos, a compact man with glasses and graying temples, pulled up a series of documents on screen. The encryption on that flash drive was military grade, which means Isaiah had helped creating it. Someone with access to intelligence resources. "What did you find?" Nia asked, standing behind them to see the screen. Proof of what Isaiah suspected. Wire transfers showing payments from defense contractors to offshore accounts linked to 3 different military officials. Communication logs showing coordination between those officials and groups designated as enemy combatants. Photographic evidence of weapons shipments that violated international treaties. Carlos scrolled through file after file. Isaiah wasn't just documenting corruption. He was documenting treason. The word hung in the air like smoke. Nia felt her legs weaken and sat down on the edge of the bed. People committed treason, and they killed him to hide it? That's what we believe. But here's where it gets complicated. Mason moved to sit across from her, his expression grave. 2 of the officials Isaiah identified are no longer in service. One died of a heart attack 4 years ago. Another retired with full honors and now works as a defense consultant. But the third is still active duty. Colonel Richard Vance, currently stationed at the Pentagon in an oversight position. So he has power to keep this buried. And motivation. If Isaiah's evidence went public, Vance would face court-martial at minimum, possibly federal prison. Derek leaned against the wall, arms crossed. We did background checks. Vance has connections to private military contractors, sits on advisory boards, has his fingers in multiple lucrative arrangements. He's built an empire on corruption, and he's been monitoring us, Mason added. We ran some checks of our own. That black SUV you've been seeing? Registered to a security company that Vance's brother-in-law owns. The man who's been showing up at her diner? Former military intelligence, now works private sector, connected to the same network. Nia's hands clenched in her lap. So what do we do? If he has that much power and reach, how do we stop him? We go public, Carlos said. But carefully, with documentation that's been distributed to multiple secure locations, with journalists ready to publish, with legal representation in place. We make it impossible for him to suppress this without making things worse for himself. That's where Clara Jennings comes in, Mason said. I know she contacted you. She's good, trustworthy, and she has a track record of protecting her sources. If we give her this story with full documentation, she can publish it in a way that forces official investigation. But that puts a target on all of us. Nia looked at each man in turn. You realize that? Once this goes public, Vance and everyone connected to him will come after us. They're already after us, Derek pointed out. The only difference is whether we're fighting back or just waiting for them to make a move. What about Amara? Nia's voice cracked slightly. She's 7 years old. She doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. Mason moved to crouch in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. The safest thing for Amara is for this truth to come out. Right now, you're a liability that can be quietly eliminated. Once the story is public, you become too visible to touch. They can't make you disappear without raising questions. Nia closed her eyes, trying to think past the fear. And Isaiah? If there's any chance he's alive, going public could endanger him. Or it could free him. Carlos pulled up another file. We found records of a classified medical facility that treated an unidentified patient with injuries consistent with an IED explosion around the time Isaiah supposedly died. The patient was listed as a protected witness. No name, just a number. He was transferred out 6 months later to an unknown location. You think that was Isaiah? The timing matches. The injury profile matches. And the facility specializes in treating intelligence assets who need to be kept off the books. Carlos adjusted his glasses. If Isaiah survived and was placed in protective custody, it would explain why his death was staged. They couldn't let him testify publicly about what he knew, but they couldn't kill him outright either. Too many people knew he was investigating corruption, so they disappeared him. The cruelty of it made Nia's chest ache. Kept him away from everyone he loved, from his daughter, for 7 years. Which is exactly why we need to blow this open, Derek said. If he's alive and being held somewhere, public pressure could force them to acknowledge it. A knock on the door made everyone freeze. Mason moved to the peephole, then relaxed slightly. It's Jake. Jake Morrison entered carrying a manila folder, his expression grim. We have a problem. I just got word from a contact at Naval Criminal Investigative Service. They've opened a formal inquiry into our activities. Someone filed a complaint alleging that we're harassing a military widow and interfering with classified operations. Let me guess, Mason said. Filed by someone connected to Vance. Directly by Vance's office. They're claiming Nia never had any relationship with Isaiah Carter, that she's fabricating a connection to extort money from the Navy, and that we're helping her do it. Jake handed the folder to Mason. They're building a case to discredit us before we can go public. Nia felt sick. They're going to say I'm lying about Isaiah? That Amara isn't his daughter? It's a standard tactic. Destroy credibility before the truth comes out. Mason flipped through the documents, his jaw tight. But they made a mistake. If they're going this hard this fast, it means they're scared. It means they know we have real evidence. Scared people are dangerous, Derek observed. So are people with nothing left to lose. Nia stood up, her decision crystallizing. Isaiah gave his life trying to expose these people. He trusted me with that flash drive because he believed I was strong enough to see this through. I'm not going to prove him wrong. Mason looked at her with something like admiration. You understand what you're agreeing to? Once we start this, there's no backing out. Your life will change. Amara's life will change. Our lives already changed the moment those men walked into my diner. Nia's voice was steady now, the fear burned away by anger and determination. If Isaiah is alive somewhere, unable to come home because of these people, then I'm going to fight for him. And if he's really dead, then I'm going to make sure everyone knows he died a hero, not the way they tried to erase him. Carlos began copying files onto multiple encrypted drives. We'll need you to give a statement to Clara Jennings. Tell her everything from the beginning. About your relationship with Isaiah, about the flash drive, about the intimidation you've experienced. We'll also need you to do a DNA test, Jake added, to prove Amara is Isaiah's daughter. It'll shut down their claims that you're fabricating the connection. How long will all this take? The article could run within a week if Clara moves fast. The DNA test can be processed in a few days. Mason started organizing papers, moving into tactical mode. In the meantime, we need to move you and Amara somewhere safer. That apartment is too exposed. I can't afford a hotel. I can barely afford rent. You won't need to. Derek has a cabin about 2 hours north. It's isolated, secure, and off any official records. You and Amara can stay there while this develops. Mason met her eyes. I know it's disruptive, but it's necessary. Nia thought about her job at the diner, about Amara's school, about the small routines that made up their life. Walking away from all of it felt like losing the last bit of stability they had. But staying felt like waiting for something terrible to happen. When would we leave? Tonight. Pack what you need for a week or two. Tell your employer you have a family emergency. Don't tell anyone where you're going. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Nia returned to their apartment and packed bags, while Amara watched with confused concern. She called the diner and left a message about needing emergency time off. She texted the neighbor with vague explanations. She moved through their small home, wondering when they'd be able to return. Mama, what's happening? Amara asked as Nia zipped up the second suitcase. Nia sat down next to her daughter and took both small hands in hers. Remember how I told you those men are trying to find out what happened to your father? Amara nodded. Well, they found out some important things. Things that some powerful people don't want others to know about. So we need to go somewhere safe for a little while, until it's okay to come back home. Are we in danger? The directness of the question caught Nia off guard. She'd been trying to shelter Amara from the full reality, but her daughter deserved honesty. Maybe. I don't know for sure. But we're being careful, and there are good people helping us. Because of Daddy? Yes, baby. Because of your daddy. Amara was quiet for a moment, then squeezed Nia's hands. Daddy was brave. You said so. So we should be brave too. The simple logic of it, the pure faith in her young voice, made Nia's eyes sting with tears. You're right. We'll be brave together. Derek picked them up after dark, driving a nondescript sedan instead of anything that might draw attention. Nia took one last look at their apartment building as they pulled away, memorizing its familiar outline against the night sky. The drive north took them out of the city, through suburbs that gradually gave way to rural darkness. Amara fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against a pillow Nia had brought. Derek drove in silence, occasionally checking the mirrors for any following vehicles. You're doing the right thing, he said finally, as they turned onto an unmarked dirt road. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but standing up to this is important. Will it work? Can we really bring down someone like Vance? Maybe not all the way down. People like him have layers of protection, but we can damage him enough that he can't operate freely anymore. We can force investigations, shine light on things he's kept hidden. Derek glanced at her. And most importantly, we can make sure Isaiah's story is told honestly. That his daughter knows what kind of man her father really was. The cabin appeared in the headlights, a modest structure surrounded by trees. It looked solid and isolated, exactly what they needed. Derek helped carry their bags inside, showing Nia how the locks worked, where the emergency supplies were stored, how to use the landline if cell service was spotty. Mason will come by tomorrow with updates. There's food in the pantry, clean sheets in the closet. You should be safe here. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, Isaiah would be proud of you. The courage it takes to do what you're doing, to risk everything for the truth, that's exactly the kind of strength he saw in you. After he left, Nia carried sleeping Amara to one of the bedrooms and tucked her in. Then she stood at the cabin window, looking out at darkness broken only by starlight. The isolation was almost complete. No streetlights or traffic sounds or neighbors' televisions bleeding through walls. For the first time in 7 years, she felt like she was moving forward instead of just surviving. The fear was still there, constant as her heartbeat, but so was something else. Purpose, direction, the sense that Isaiah's sacrifice might finally mean something beyond grief and loss. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from Clara Jennings. Received initial documentation from your friends. This story is bigger than I thought. Ready to talk whenever you are. Nia typed back, tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. She sent the message and set the phone down, feeling the weight of decisions made and bridges burned. There was no going back now. Whatever came next, they would face it together, all of them linked by their connection to one man who tried to do the right thing in a world that punished honesty. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and somewhere in the darkness, Isaiah's story was finally beginning to emerge from the shadows where it had been buried for 7 long years. The morning sun filtered through the cabin's pine trees, creating patterns of light across the wooden floor. Nia woke to the sound of birds and the absence of traffic noise, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar silence. Beside her, Amara still slept, her breathing soft and even. The cabin felt like a pause between one life and another. Nia made coffee in the small kitchen, watching through the window as mist rose from the ground. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the diner and 2 text messages from coworkers asking if everything was okay. She didn't respond. The less people knew, the safer everyone would be. At 9 o'clock, a car came up the dirt road. Mason emerged carrying a laptop bag and a box of groceries. Nia let him in, grateful for the company and the normalcy of unpacking fresh food. How did you sleep? He asked, setting everything on the counter. Better than expected. Amara thinks we're on an adventure. That's probably the healthiest way to look at it. Mason opened the laptop. I have updates. Some good, some complicated. They sat at the small dining table while Amara colored in the next room, her presence a reminder of why they were doing this. Mason pulled up encrypted files and turned the screen so Nia could see. Clara worked fast. She's verified most of Isaiah's documentation through independent sources. The wire transfers check out, the communication logs match classified operation timelines, and she found 2 former contractors willing to speak anonymously about weapons sales they witnessed. Mason scrolled through pages of notes. Her article is nearly finished. She wants to publish in 3 days. That's fast. It needs to be. The longer we wait, the more time Vance has to build his counter-narrative. Mason pulled up another file. But there's more. Carlos traced those medical facility records deeper. The protected witness was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Montana, then moved again 6 months later. The trail goes cold after that, but we have a location to start searching. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. Montana. That's specific. Derek and Jake are driving there today. They'll visit the facility, talk to staff if possible, see what they can learn. Mason's expression was careful, measured. Nia, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that we might not find what we're hoping for. Even if Isaiah survived initially, 7 years is a long time. Things could have changed. You mean he could have died later, or chosen to stay hidden, or been moved somewhere we can't trace. Mason reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. I don't want to give you false hope, but I also don't want to discourage you from hoping at all. It's a difficult balance. I've had 7 years of not hoping. Maybe it's time to try something different. Nia pulled up a photograph on her phone, one of the few she had of Isaiah. He was smiling, wearing civilian clothes, his arm around her shoulders. Amara deserves to know if her father is alive. Even if he can't come home, even if there are complications, she deserves that truth. We'll find it. Whatever it is, we'll find it. After Mason left, Nia called Clara Jennings. The journalist answered on the second ring, her voice professional but warm. Ms. Carter, thank you for reaching out. Mason said you're almost ready to publish. I am, but I need your statement first. Your perspective as Isaiah's partner, as the mother of his child, that's the human element that makes this story resonate. Clara paused. I know this is difficult. You'll be putting yourself in a very public position. Are you certain you want to do this? Nia looked toward the living room where Amara was building something with blocks, her small face serious with concentration. I'm certain. They talked for over an hour. Nia described meeting Isaiah near the naval base, their brief but intense relationship, the way he'd changed in those final weeks before the mission. She talked about discovering her pregnancy after he was gone, about the military officials who delivered news of his death with rehearsed sympathy, about 7 years of raising Amara alone while carrying questions she couldn't answer. He told me something was wrong with the mission, Nia said, her voice steady despite the emotions rising in her chest. He said if anything happened, I needed to protect our child. I thought he meant protect her from grief, from the pain of losing him. Now I understand he meant protect her from the people who wanted him silenced. Clara's typing paused. That's a powerful statement. Can I quote you directly? Yes. People need to understand what they took from us. Not just Isaiah's life, but our future. Amara's right to know her father. All of it stolen because he tried to do what was right. After the call ended, Nia felt hollowed out, but also lighter, as if speaking the truth aloud had released pressure she hadn't known she was carrying. She joined Amara on the floor, helping build block towers and listening to her daughter chatter about the birds she'd seen outside and the dream she'd had about flying. Mama, when can we go home? Amara asked, carefully placing a block on top of the tower. I'm not sure yet, baby. Maybe another week or two. I miss my room. And Marcus from school. He's my friend. I know. I miss home too. Nia smoothed her daughter's hair. But sometimes we have to be patient while grown-ups fix complicated things. Things about Daddy? Yes. Amara was quiet for a moment, then looked up with those serious eyes. If Daddy is alive somewhere, do you think he remembers us? The question pierced straight through Nia's composure. If he's alive, baby, I promise you he thinks about us every single day. He loved us so much. That kind of love doesn't just disappear. Even after 7 years. Even after 7 years. That night, after Amara was asleep, Nia sat on the cabin's small porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The stars were more visible here than in the city, scattered across the sky like scattered light. She tried to imagine Isaiah somewhere under these same stars, looking up and thinking about the family he'd been forced to leave behind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek, arrived in Montana. Facility confirmed they had a protected witness matching the timeline. Staff change makes it hard to get details, but we're working on it. Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. Easier said than done, when hope felt like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. But she tried, sitting in the darkness, allowing herself to imagine scenarios she'd locked away years ago. Isaiah walking through a door. Isaiah meeting Amara for the first time. Isaiah alive, somewhere, waiting to be found. The next 2 days passed in strange suspension. Nia and Amara developed a routine in the cabin. Breakfast, schoolwork that Nia improvised from Amara's textbooks, walks in the woods, simple dinners, and evenings reading or playing card games. It felt almost like a vacation, except for the constant undercurrent of tension, the waiting for news that might change everything. Mason visited each morning with updates. Clara's article was being reviewed by lawyers. The DNA test Nia had submitted showed a 99.9% probability that Amara was Isaiah Carter's biological daughter. Derek and Jake had found a nurse who remembered the protected witness, a man with severe injuries who'd refused to speak about his past. She said he was quiet, cooperative with treatment, but withdrawn emotionally. Mason reported, sitting at the now-familiar dining table. He left after 6 months of rehabilitation. She doesn't know where he went, but she remembered something specific. He had a tattoo on his forearm that he always kept covered with long sleeves. Nia's breath caught. The unit tattoo. That's what we think. It's not confirmation, but it's another piece that fits. So what now? How do we find where he went after Montana? That's where it gets difficult. The transfer was handled through classified channels. There's no public record, no paper trail we can access legally. Mason leaned back in his chair, but Carlos thinks he can trace it through back channels. It'll take time, and it's not exactly authorized, but it's possible. Do whatever you need to do. I don't care about authorization anymore. Mason smiled slightly. Isaiah picked a strong woman. He knew what he was doing. On the 3rd day at the cabin, Clara's article went live. Mason called at dawn, before Nia was fully awake, his voice urgent. It's published. Front page of the digital edition. Major placement. Clara did an incredible job. You need to see this. Nia opened her laptop, her hands shaking slightly as she navigated to the news site. The headline filled the screen. Decorated Navy SEAL exposed military corruption before suspicious death. Evidence suggests he may have survived. Below it was a photograph of Isaiah in uniform, young and serious, and next to it, a more recent photo of Nia and Amara that Clara must have requested. The article was long, detailed, methodically laying out the evidence from the flash drive alongside Clara's independent verification. It named Colonel Vance specifically, connecting him to the weapons deals and showing the timeline of Isaiah's investigation. But what made Nia's throat tighten was the personal section, where Clara had woven in her interview. Her own words appeared on the screen, describing Isaiah's warning, his fear, his final days before the mission. The article made him human, not just a soldier, but a man with a partner and an unborn child, a man who'd sacrificed everything for principles that should have been protected instead of punished. It's good, Nia whispered into the phone. It's really good. It's already spreading. Major outlets are picking it up, military advocacy groups are sharing it, and social media is exploding with reactions. Mason's voice carried satisfaction. Vance can't suppress this. It's too big now. Within hours, Nia's phone began receiving calls from reporters, from victims' advocacy organizations, from veterans who'd had their own experiences with military corruption. She didn't answer most of them, but their presence felt like validation. The story was out. Isaiah's truth was finally being heard. The response to Clara's article moved faster than anyone had anticipated. By afternoon, the Department of Defense had released a statement promising a full review of the allegations. By evening, 3 senators had called for investigations. By the next morning, Colonel Vance had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal inquiry. Mason arrived at the cabin with the news, along with Derek and Jake, who'd returned from Montana. They gathered around the dining table, while Amara played outside within view of the windows. Vance is contained for now, but he's not finished, Mason said. His lawyers are already pushing back, claiming the documents are fabricated, that Isaiah was mentally unstable, that this is all a conspiracy by disgruntled veterans. Let them claim whatever they want. The evidence speaks for itself. Jake pulled out a folder containing printouts of social media posts. Look at this. Thousands of veterans are sharing their own stories of corruption they witnessed and couldn't report. Isaiah's case is opening doors that have been locked for years. There's more, Derek added, his expression cautious. The nurse in Montana, the one who treated the protected witness, she reached out after seeing the article. She wants to talk on the record. She says she has information about where the patient went after he left the facility. Nia stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. What information? She overheard a conversation between two federal marshals who came to transfer him. They mentioned a place called Whitehorse, a small town near the Canadian border. Very isolated, very quiet. The kind of place someone could disappear into. That's in Alaska, Carlos said, pulling up a map on his laptop. Population under 800. No major infrastructure, mostly seasonal tourism and fishing. If you wanted to hide someone long-term, that would work. Nia stared at the map, at the tiny dot representing Whitehorse, at the vast emptiness surrounding it. How sure are we that he's there? We're not sure of anything, Mason said carefully. But it's our strongest lead. The nurse is credible, her timeline matches, and the location makes sense for a long-term protective placement. So we go there. We find him. It's not that simple. If Isaiah is there under federal protection, approaching him directly could trigger all kinds of legal complications. And if he's not there, if it's someone else, or if the lead is wrong, we'll have wasted time and resources. Mason's voice was gentle but firm. We need to be strategic about this. Strategic means what? Waiting while lawyers argue and bureaucrats stall? Nia shook her head. My daughter's father might be in Alaska, alive, and you want me to be strategic? I want you to be smart, Mason countered. Going in without a plan could make things worse. If Isaiah is there, he's there for a reason. Maybe he's in danger. Maybe he's protecting you by staying hidden. We don't know the full situation yet. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Jake broke it by speaking quietly. What if we do reconnaissance first? No direct contact, just observation. We confirm whether anyone matching Isaiah's description is living in Whitehorse. If we find him, then we decide next steps together. That could work, Derek agreed. Carlos and I could go. We're trained for surveillance. We know what to look for. Give us a week, and we'll know whether this lead is real. Nia wanted to argue, wanted to demand they move faster, but the logic was sound. Rushing in blindly could endanger Isaiah. If he was truly there, could compromise whatever protection was keeping him alive. She forced herself to breathe, to think past the desperate hope clawing at her chest. 1 week. But I want daily updates, and if you find him, I need to know immediately. You have my word, Carlos said. They left that afternoon, driving north toward Alaska with equipment and cover stories prepared. Mason stayed behind with Nia and Amara, partly for protection and partly because someone needed to manage the growing media attention around the story. The days that followed were the longest of Nia's life. Each morning, she woke hoping for the call that would change everything. Each night, she went to bed with nothing but uncertainty. Mason kept her updated on the investigation into Vance, which was progressing with bureaucratic slowness. Multiple officials were being questioned, records were being subpoenaed, but real accountability remained frustratingly distant. These things take time, Mason explained, though his frustration matched hers. The system protects itself. Even when corruption is exposed, actually punishing the corrupt is a different battle. On the 5th day, Carlos called. His voice crackled with static from the poor connection, but Nia heard the excitement underneath. We found someone. Male, early 40s, lives alone in a cabin outside town. He matches Isaiah's physical description. Dark skin, athletic build, military bearing. He keeps to himself, does odd jobs for locals, pays cash for everything. Nia's legs nearly gave out. She sat down hard on the couch, gripping the phone. Are you sure it's him? Not positive yet. We haven't seen him up close enough to be certain. But Nia, he has a scar pattern on his left arm that could be from the kind of IED injury Isaiah supposedly sustained. And yesterday, we saw him at the post office. He was picking up a package, and when he signed for it, Derek swears the signature looked like Isaiah's handwriting. I need to see him. I need to come there. We were hoping you'd say that. But we need to be careful about how we approach this. If it is Isaiah, and if he's under some kind of protection arrangement, showing up suddenly could create problems. Mason took the phone from Nia's trembling hands. What's your recommendation? Bring Nia here. Let her see him from a distance first. Confirm it's really Isaiah before we make direct contact. If it's him, we figure out together how to handle the reunion. If it's not, at least Nia will know, and we can stop chasing this particular ghost. They made arrangements quickly. Mason would drive Nia to Alaska, a 2-day trip that would give Derek and Carlos time to maintain surveillance and gather more information. Amara would stay at the cabin with Jake, who'd return to provide security. Saying goodbye to her daughter was harder than Nia expected. Amara clung to her, suddenly anxious about being separated. Where are you going, Mama? I need to check on something important. Something about your father. Nia knelt down, holding Amara's face between her hands. Jake is going to stay with you, and I'll be back in just a few days. Can you be brave for me? Is Daddy in Alaska? The perceptiveness of the question shouldn't have surprised Nia anymore, but it did. Maybe. I don't know yet, but I need to find out. If he is, will you bring him home? I'll try, baby. I promise I'll try. The drive north was long and mostly silent. Mason seemed to understand that Nia needed space to process what might be waiting at the end of this journey. They stopped at roadside motels, ate fast food from drive-thrus, and watched the landscape change from forest to mountains to the vast, stark beauty of the far north. As they crossed into Alaska, Nia felt something shift inside her. 7 years of grief and questions and careful survival were converging on this moment. Either Isaiah was alive and she was about to see him again, or this was another dead end and she'd have to finally accept that he was truly gone. She didn't know which possibility terrified her more. They reached Whitehorse on a gray afternoon, the town as small and isolated as Carlos had described. Derek met them at a small rental cabin on the outskirts, his expression serious but not discouraging. He's here. We've confirmed his routine. Every morning, he runs the same route, then works at a wood shop in town. Afternoons, he's usually at his cabin. Evenings, he sometimes goes to the local bar, sits alone, drinks 1 beer, and leaves. You're certain it's him? Nia's voice came out steady despite her racing heart. We're 90% certain. The physical match is strong. The mannerisms match what we remember. But we haven't gotten close enough for facial recognition confirmation, and he's grown a beard that changes his appearance. Derek pulled out a series of photographs taken with a long lens. These are from yesterday. Nia took the photos with shaking hands. The images showed a man in work clothes, his face partially obscured by the beard and the angle of the shots. But something in the way he moved, in the set of his shoulders, in the careful way he scanned his surroundings before entering buildings, all of it felt familiar. That's him, she whispered. I don't know how I know, but that's Isaiah. Mason studied the photographs over her shoulder. The beard makes it hard to be completely sure. It's him. I can feel it. Nia looked up at Derek. When can I see him? In person. Tomorrow morning. He runs at dawn. Same route every day. We can position you where you'll have a clear view when he passes. If it's really Isaiah, you'll know. And then we decide how to make contact. That night, Nia barely slept. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to wind rattle the windows, and tried to prepare herself for the morning. What would she say? How would he react? Would he even remember her after 7 years of whatever he'd been through? And underneath all those questions was a deeper fear. What if he'd chosen this isolation? What if being found was the last thing he wanted? Dawn came cold and clear. Mason drove her to a spot along the running trail, parking where the truck would blend with other vehicles. They waited, Nia's hands clenched in her lap, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. There, Derek said quietly from the back seat, coming from the north. Nia saw him then, a figure jogging steadily along the trail. As he came closer, details emerged. The athletic build, the military precision in his stride, the way he breathed in controlled rhythm. And then he was passing their position, close enough that Nia could see his face clearly despite the beard. Close enough to see the scar tissue along his left arm. Close enough to see eyes she'd loved and lost and mourned. Isaiah, she breathed, tears streaming down her face without permission. It's really you. The man jogged past without seeing them, continuing his route, alive and moving and real after 7 years of absence that had felt like death. Mason reached over and squeezed her shoulder. Now we know. The question is, what do we do about it? Nia wiped her face, her grief transforming into something harder and more determined. We bring him home. Whatever it takes, we bring him home to his daughter. The decision to approach Isaiah required careful planning. Mason made contact with a former JAG officer who specialized in witness protection cases, explaining the situation without revealing Isaiah's location. The advice was clear. Direct contact could violate federal protection agreements and potentially endanger everyone involved. But there's a loophole. Mason explained to Nia that afternoon. If Isaiah initiates contact voluntarily, if he chooses to step forward, then the protection arrangement becomes moot. He'd be exercising his right to end his own isolation. So we need him to recognize us first. Nia stared out the window toward the mountains. We need him to know we're here. Derek had an idea. Tomorrow he goes to the wood shop. There's a coffee place across the street where he sometimes stops after work. What if you're there? Just sitting, visible. If it's really Isaiah, he'll recognize you. Then it's his choice whether to approach. The plan was simple enough to work. The next afternoon, Nia sat at a corner table in the small coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a mug she couldn't drink from. Her stomach was too tight with anticipation. Mason waited outside in the truck, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. At 4:15, Isaiah emerged from the wood shop. He wore clothes covered in sawdust, his beard fuller than in the surveillance photos. He paused on the sidewalk, looking both ways with that same careful awareness she remembered. Then he turned toward the coffee shop. Nia's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Isaiah pushed through the door, moving toward the counter, not yet looking in her direction. She didn't move, didn't call out, just waited. He ordered coffee from the teenager behind the register, started to turn toward the door. Then his eyes swept the room and landed on her face. Everything stopped. Isaiah froze completely, his coffee forgotten in his hand. His expression cycled through shock, disbelief, fear, and something that might have been hope. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the small space. 7 years of separation compressed into a single, suspended breath. Then Nia stood, her legs shaking. Isaiah. His name and her voice seemed to break whatever paralysis held him. He set the coffee down carefully, his hands trembling. Nia, how did you can't be here. It's not safe. Safe. The word came out sharp with 7 years of grief. You've been alive this whole time, and you're talking about safe? Other customers were starting to notice the tension. Isaiah glanced around, then moved quickly to her table, sitting down across from her. Up close, she could see the changes. New scars on his face, gray threading through his hair, a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I didn't have a choice, he said quietly, urgently. After the mission went wrong, they told me if I didn't disappear, you'd be targeted. You and the baby. They said the only way to keep you safe was to let everyone think I was dead. They lied to you. Nia's voice cracked. They used your love for us to make you complicit in your own disappearance. And meanwhile, I raised our daughter alone, telling her stories about a father she'd never meet. Isaiah's face went pale. Daughter, you had her. Her name is Amara. She's 7 years old. She has your eyes and your stubborn streak, and she draws pictures of a father she's never known. Tears streamed down Nia's face now, unchecked. She deserves better than a ghost story, Isaiah. She deserves to know you're alive. I can't. His hands clenched on the table. The people I exposed, they're still out there. If they know I'm alive, if they know about Amara, they already know. Everything's already public. Your evidence, your investigation, all of it. Nia pulled out her phone and showed him Clara's article. The story broke 5 days ago. Colonel Vance is under investigation. The corruption you tried to stop is finally being addressed. Isaiah stared at the screen, his expression transforming as he read. You did this. Your team did this. Mason Hale and the others. They found me, found the flash drive you left me, and they made sure your sacrifice meant something. Nia reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching his. You don't have to hide anymore. The truth is out. You can come home. I don't know if I remember how. Isaiah's voice was barely audible. 7 years of living like this, of being no one, of watching every shadow. I don't know if I can just walk back into a normal life. You don't have to figure it all out today, but you need to meet your daughter. She needs to know her father didn't abandon her. Isaiah closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were wet. What do I say to her? How do I explain 7 years of absence? You tell her the truth, that you were protecting her the only way you knew how, that you loved her every single day, even though you couldn't be there. Nia finally reached across and took his hand. It was rough with calluses, scarred, but unmistakably his. She's an incredible kid, Isaiah. Smart and brave and so much like you. She deserves to know you. They talked for another hour, Isaiah slowly opening up about the years of isolation, the rehabilitation, the constant fear that his presence would endanger the people he loved. Nia told him about Amara's childhood, the milestones he'd missed, the questions she'd asked that Nia couldn't answer. When they finally left the coffee shop together, Mason was waiting by the truck. He and Isaiah stared at each other for a long moment, then embraced roughly, the kind of wordless communication that only soldiers who'd served together could understand. "Welcome back, brother," Mason said quietly. "I don't know if I'm back yet, but I'm here." The drive to the cabin where Amara waited took 2 days. Isaiah rode with Nia, their conversations filling in gaps that years had created. He told her about the IED explosion that should have killed him, about waking up in the medical facility with federal agents telling him his death was officially confirmed and his only option was protective isolation. They said if I came forward, the contractors would kill everyone connected to me. They painted it like witness protection, but it was really a prison. Isaiah stared out the window at the passing landscape. "I almost broke 100 times. Almost found a way to contact you. But every time, I thought about you being safe, about our child growing up without a target on their back, and I stayed. You sacrificed everything," Nia said. "Your identity, your future, your family. That kind of sacrifice shouldn't have been necessary. But it was what I knew how to do. Soldiers understand sacrifice. We're trained for it." He looked at her. "I just never expected the sacrifice to last this long." When they arrived at the cabin, Jake was waiting on the porch. He recognized Isaiah immediately despite the beard, despite the years. "Carter." "Damn, Jake." Isaiah's voice was rough with emotion as they gripped forearms. "It's good to see you." Amara's inside. She knows someone important is coming to meet her, but not who. Jake glanced at Nia. "We thought you'd want to tell her yourself." Nia and Isaiah walked to the cabin door together. She could feel him trembling, see the fear and hope warring in his expression. She squeezed his hand once, then opened the door. Amara was sitting at the table with crayons and paper, her back to them. When she turned around, her eyes went straight to Isaiah, studying him with that serious intelligence that was so much his. "Amara," Nia said gently, "there's someone I want you to meet. Someone very important." Isaiah knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her eye level. His voice when he spoke was thick with tears. "Amara, my name is Isaiah Carter. I'm your father." Amara looked at him for a long moment, taking in his face, his scarred arms, the tattoo barely visible beneath his sleeve. Then she looked at Nia. "Is it really him, Mama?" "It's really him, baby." Amara turned back to Isaiah, her expression serious. "You were gone for a long time." "I was, and I'm so sorry for that. I wanted to be with you and your mama more than anything in the world, but I had to stay away to keep you safe." "From bad people?" "Yes, from bad people who didn't want the truth to come out." Amara considered this, then reached out and touched the scar on Isaiah's face gently. "Did they hurt you?" "They tried, but I'm okay now, and I'm here if you'll let me be." Something shifted in Amara's expression, her reserve cracking. She stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Isaiah's neck. "I drew so many pictures of you. Mama has them in a folder." Isaiah pulled her close, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I want to see every single one. The weeks that followed were a study in adjustment. Isaiah couldn't immediately return to a normal life. The legal complexities of his situation required careful navigation. But with Clara's article generating sustained pressure, the Department of Defense was forced to acknowledge his survival and the circumstances that led to his isolation. Colonel Vance was formally charged with conspiracy, weapons trafficking, and obstruction of justice. 2 other officials were also indicted. The trials would take years, but the machinery of accountability had finally begun moving. Isaiah gave testimony, both to military investigators and to congressional committees examining corruption in defense contracting. Watching him speak publicly for the first time, Nia saw the man she'd fallen in love with emerge from beneath the layers of trauma and isolation. He was still wounded, still healing, but he was fighting back. The SEAL team who'd made it all possible received both commendation and criticism. Some officials praised their dedication to finding the truth. Others accused them of overstepping boundaries and jeopardizing classified operations. Mason took it all in stride. "We did what was right," he said simply. "That's all that matters." For Nia and Amara, life slowly found a new shape. They moved into a small house that Isaiah rented near the cabin, giving them space to rebuild as a family without the pressure of their old life. Amara adjusted to having a father with remarkable resilience, though there were difficult moments when 7 years of absence couldn't be easily bridged. "She's amazing," Isaiah said one evening, watching Amara do homework at the kitchen table. "You raised her so well on your own. I did what I had to do, but it's better now. Having you here makes everything better." Isaiah looked at her, his expression serious. "I know I can't just pick up where we left off. Too much time has passed, too much has changed. But I want to try, if you'll let me. We'll figure out together. That's what families do." Clara's continued reporting kept the story alive in public consciousness. She documented the trials, the systemic changes being implemented in military oversight, and a broader conversation about accountability that Isaiah's case had sparked. Other whistleblowers came forward, emboldened by his example. "Your father started something important," Nia told Amara one night as they looked through old photographs together, now mixed with new ones that included Isaiah. "He showed that telling the truth matters, even when it's dangerous. Will he have to keep being brave? Or can he just be a regular dad now?" Isaiah, listening from the doorway, smiled. "I think being a regular dad might be the bravest thing I've ever tried." The legal recognition of Isaiah's service and the acknowledgement of the injustice he'd suffered came with formal apologies and compensation. It didn't erase the lost years, but it helped. More importantly, it cleared his name and allowed him to reclaim his identity. Mason visited often, checking on his friend and making sure the family was adjusting. The bond between the SEALs had been strengthened through this fight, their brotherhood extending now to include Nia and Amara. "You gave us purpose," Mason told Isaiah during one visit. "After we left service, we were drifting, finding you, fighting for you. That reminded us why we served in the first place." 6 months after the reunion, Amara's school held a family day. Parents were invited to talk about their work and answer questions. Isaiah volunteered, nervous but determined. Standing in front of a classroom of 7-year-olds, he talked not about combat or missions, but about courage and honesty and standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. "My daughter taught me something important," he said, looking at Amara sitting in the front row. "She taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Her mama showed me that every day for 7 years while I was gone. And now I get to learn from both of them." Amara beamed with pride, and Nia, watching from the back of the classroom, felt tears sting her eyes. They'd come so far from that moment in the diner when a child's innocent observation had cracked open years of hidden truth. That evening, the family sat together on their porch watching the sunset. Amara was nestled between her parents, secure in a way she'd never been before. Isaiah's arm was around Nia's shoulders, his other hand holding his daughter's. "Daddy," Amara said sleepily, "can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart. Are you going to stay now? Forever?" Isaiah looked at Nia, then down at his daughter. Forever. I promise. Good. Amara yawned. Because we have a lot of time to make up for. We do. And we've got the rest of our lives to do it. As darkness settled over the mountains, Nia thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain and the separation, the courage it took to pursue truth, and the people who'd stood with them when it mattered most. Isaiah's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. His evidence had exposed corruption. His survival had become a symbol of hope for others fighting similar battles. But more than any of that, he was home. Their family was whole. And the little girl who'd recognized the tattoo had helped bring her father back from the shadows. The tattoo on Isaiah's arm, once a symbol of covert operations and hidden missions, now meant something different. It represented the connection that couldn't be broken, the love that survived years of separation, and the truth that finally emerged into light. Amara traced the faded design with her small finger, no longer a mystery, but a part of their story. "It's pretty," she said. "It is now," Isaiah agreed, pulling both his girls closer. "It is now. If someone you loved disappeared to protect you from a truth, would you have the courage to uncover it, even if it meant risking everything you'd built in their absence?" Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and the families who refuse to let truth stay buried.